Okay, so we got the ammeter wires. Those are not easy to mix up. We're going to group this for this is the oil pressure gauge. And earlier I talked about the ground signal and the positive input and then the sending unit signal. These gauges ground through the case, so you won't have a ground until it's mounted back up on here. Now, I've done a lot of gauge calibration, which is when I use the digital pyrometer. I check the temperature out there, and I do adjustments on these. These do have some mechanical adjustments. I don't recommend anyone doing that. Or you can actually add resistors and play around with it to get it right. But I always have to have a jumper wire here to make sure that there's a good ground, because you disconnect it, the gauges all move. And it's a little disappointing when the first few that I tried that I'd get it all perfect and mount it and it'd be different. I go, what the heck? So that's where they get the ground, is through the case. So okay, well, let's go to this one now. So this is the sending unit. What I'm going to do is write the oil gauge. Here we go. First things first. I have the problem of thinking faster than getting things done, and I always get tripped up that way. Fortunately, in my older age, I've slowed down because the thinking faster doesn't do it the same. So here's what I'm going to recommend. We already discussed that these common junctions are going to be voltage supply. You can tell by the wire, it's brown and green, I think. It's hard to see in this. So I'm just going to go, we have this wire tied together, right, zip tied. We have a label for oil, and then I'm just going to put an S for sender. And we're just going to do the one single wire with the S. The single wire is this one way over here. So the S stands for sender. So now, what that says. Good. As you can see, this is an old car, so you got to be real gentle here. If it doesn't want to turn, see a lot of times the whole post will want to turn, and you'll rip the wires on the inside. You don't want to do that. So what I do is I hold the wire, the big fat wire, with one thumb, and see how that broke loose and nothing else spun. That's and these are brass nuts, so magnets don't work on it. Oh shoot! You go retrieve it. Oh, there it is. See? It's a brass nut. So the magnet won't help you. No jokes after that, guys. Alright. I like to put these nuts back on, that way you don't lose them. And I'm holding this one wire here and pushing at the same time. I think the reason they use brass on these is to reduce corrosion. Corrosion will change voltage movement, so it'll create resistance, and things won't work as well. So now we're going to go to the fuel gauge. All right, mark that. Fuel. I got to tie the wires. Should be these. And you look at this and you go, okay, you have all these nice old cloth covered color traced wires, and then what's this red plastic thing here? Somebody has tapped into ignition voltage right here, which is acceptable. A lot of it's best always to go to the ignition switch, but this is a quick, easy way, and it shouldn't affect anything so long as everything else is good on the system.
So what's that for, that red wire?
I don't know where it goes. You have to follow it. It goes right. Oh, that's interesting. There's a common post here with a bunch of spades sticking out that a lot of wires go to, so maybe they just added that because the ignition lost its feed someplace. Okay, so now the fuel gauge wires are tied together. I'll label that. You glad I'm doing this now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we'll get this one out of the way. That's for that. Okay. And now we're going to label the sending wire, which is this one single wire. There's always a single wire for the sender. I used to use pen and pencil on this, but if it sits around a long time, it'll rub off. Sharpie's the best. So there's what we do right now.
And you did an S on the other one. That's not going to confuse you?
Well, because these wires are tied
clusters.
together. They go to one gauge, and that's labeled. This goes to this gauge, and it's labeled, and it has one wire, and the rest all go to the same post. Now, as you can see, this post it has another nut below, so if you have two wrenches, you can work them against each other, and you won't spin that post. All this just to get the clock out. Now you see that one loose wire there, or that one's, we're going to leave that behind. We're just going to leave it on that gauge. We don't have to worry about, see that? That's the jumper wire that feeds the voltage to this. So we're getting down there now. All right, so we got one wire here. Let's get these things out of the way. The clock is in the center. Here's the clock. Now, here's the power feed for the clock. And you go, what's that? That's a little condenser. This clock has points in it, kind of like your ignition. So what happens when points open is there's a spark. Those points, when they wind the clock, there's a little magnet and points that make connection, and it does that. So the condenser drops that, or sucks up some of that excess voltage supplied, right? Now this one's, there you go. Now that's a tiny little brass screw, which hopefully we will not lose, because it's very special thread, and I think it has a. Okay, let's get a smaller screw. And you can see I got my finger behind here to support it, because I had to put pressure to get that thing to break loose. Okay. Now, that is a very tiny screw, and there should be a flat piece on the back like that it screws into with threads. And it has a shoulder on it. I don't know if you can see that. It has a shoulder that goes up against the side, so you don't have to put a wrench on the back side of it. And what we're going to do, we've got one more thing to take off, and this is free. These little green wires here go to the lighting for this, for the night. And you can see there's a resistor here too. That I don't even, where's the adjuster on this? I can't think of it now. Anyways, it reduces the voltage. And you can see this one wire feeds all of them. They all go from this block. So we're going to take this off. Just loosen that, and it should just pull right out. Maybe a little more. Now it's free. Watch it. And it should just slide right out. There we go. All right. Free Willy. Huh, Willie?
Absolutely.
Okay. What we're going to do with this wire, so it does not, the screw, and I'm going to put it right back on this thing right here with the nut, the backing nut. You can always replace it with a little screw and nut, but if you can keep the original stuff, why not? So we're going to go ahead and... All right. We're free. Any questions?